Hi everyone, welcome to sexual harassment training. So we're going to start this training by talking a little bit about how it is designed. The training is designed with an intent to provide relevant knowledge regarding the issues surrounding sexual harassment, including workplace bullying. The training has two parts to it. Part one discusses about quid pro quo and hostile work environment, and part two discusses about workplace bullying. At the end of this training, participants are provided with questions to test their level of understanding about the topics that were discussed. Case studies and video links with testimonies and skits are included in the training to engage participants using media, real life testimonies, and court case settlements. So let's start with part one, sexual harassment. Now, what we're gonna cover in this particular part is that we're gonna look at the objectives, we're gonna look at the definitions, we're gonna look what is not sexual harassment, we're gonna discuss about the investigation process and what goes on beyond investigation, and we're gonna look at a case study, and at the end, we're gonna just have a video that will recap everything that we talked about. Um, to make it more a little bit more to memorize all of that we talked about. All right, so starting with course objectives, here we're going to look at the primary laws that prohibit workplace harassment. And we're going to talk about how these regulations define sexual harassment and different types of sexual harassment, the consequences of engaging in unlawful harassment, and understand the protocols of addressing these complaints, and also know about the prevention methods. So you might be wondering why why we are taking this training, or why do we concern ourselves so much about this particular topic. We why we are well we, we are taking this training because it is required by law. So let's talk about the laws that govern this topic. We have federal law and we have state laws that prohibit sexual harassment in workplace and require employers to provide sexual harassment training to all supervisors and managers. We will go over those requirements in more detail as we move along this training. So let's talk about the law. The federal law that prohibits sexual harassment is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and several states have adopted their own state level of laws that prohibit sexual harassment. Our training in particular will be covering the laws that prohibit sexual harassment in the state of California. So you may ask, why are we focusing on the state of California? Well, California has a reputation of holding very strict regulatory practices in employment that are much more progressive than any other states. So many multi-state companies minimize exposure by adopting policies and procedures that adhere to California's regulatory requirements. As we discuss more about this topic, you will see the difference between federal law and California. Let's start with federal law. Now, the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as we discussed earlier, is the federal law that protects individuals against employment discrimination on the basis of color, race, national origin, sex, and religion. And it is applicable to employers with 15 or more employees, including state and local governments. Well, in the state of California, it's the Assembly Bill number 76, Section 12940, that protects a person from discrimination in terms of compensation, terms and conditions, or privileges in employment, such as hiring, training, discharge, based on color, religious creed, national origin, race, ancestry, physical and mental disability, medical condition, marital status, sex, age, and sexual orientation. Not only that, Assembly Bill number 1825 covers more on the subject of sexual harassment, training, and education. The bill defines harassment as unlawful employment practice against an employee directly by the employer or indirectly by the agents of the employer with the employer's knowledge. This bill also requires employers with 50 or more employees to provide 2 hours of sexual harassment training and education to all supervisory employees once every 2 years. And that is the reason why you are taking this training. Now, who enforces these regulations? Well, it's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission who enforces Title VII, and in California, it is the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing that enforces AB 76 and AB 1825. So, all of these facts that we just discussed makes this topic a topic of concern because it has negative consequences of being subject to disciplinary action, ruined career, civil lawsuit, personal liability, and costly settlements. Not only that, it tarnishes reputation, decreases trust, and reduces productivity. It increases the workload because we've got now high turnover, resulting in increased recruitment and training costs. Therefore, it is very important to provide this training and also have strong policies in place that clearly communicate sexual harassment as prohibited conduct with clear guidelines on how to file a complaint, assuring confidentiality to the extent possible, with no retaliation, through prompt and impartial investigation and corrective action. Now, let's discuss about the definition of sexual harassment in depth. Sexual harassment is defined as any unwelcome behavior exhibited because of sex. In other words, it's not just about sex, but an action or a conduct that is motivated because of sex. And because of sex is defined to include pregnancy, childbirth, gender related appearance and behavior, whether or not stereotypically associated with the person's assigned sex at birth. Then, who is a victim and who is a harasser? The victim and the harasser may be a woman or a man. There may be female to female harassment or male to male harassment. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, coworker, supervisor from another area, or non employee referred to as third party sexual harassment. The victim does not have to be the person harassed, but could be affected by the offensive conduct as well. So then we would want to talk a little bit more about who is a third party harasser or what is third party harassment. Well, third party harassment, sexual harassment, is perpetrated not by employees but rather by individuals outside the organization, involving unwelcomed requests for sexual favors and verbal or physical harassment that creates a hostile work environment for our employees. Let's take a look at some examples. One of the one source of third-party sexual harassment may be from vendors or suppliers. This group pretty much includes anyone that provides goods or services to our organization who has some form of contact with our employees that provides an opportunity for sexual harassment. Examples may include delivery people, repair persons, outside trainers, and consultants. Another source of third-party sexual harassment is clients or customers. The type of customer or client or the type of business is of no consequence. An accountant or attorney can be sexually harassed just as easily as a waitress at a truck stop. It doesn't matter if the harassment takes place on the employer premises or at a client or customer work site as long as our employee is engaging in a work related activity. So now let's move on to the types of sexual harassment. There are two types of sexual harassment: quid pro quo and hostile work environment. We are going to start with quid pro quo. Quid pro quo in Latin means this for that, and it occurs when the harasser ties sex to employment decisions, promises a reward in exchange for sexual favors, threatens a penalty if sexual advances are rejected. It could be explicit or implicit, applies even if the threat isn't carried out and the victim doesn't file a complaint. That's very important to note. In other words, quid pro quo is a type of harassment that occurs when some type of employment benefit is made contingent on sexual favors in some capacity. For example, this might be a supervisor offering a promotion if an employee will meet his or her sexual demands. Usually, this type of sexual harassment, by its nature, occurs between someone in a position of power and a subordinate. This is because the person in a position of power has the ability to confer employment benefits. Employment benefits in this context might include favorable performance reviews or recommendations, promotions, raises, and sought after work assignments or work shifts. This type of sexual harassment can also occur when there is a threat of negative work consequences for refusing to confer sexual favors. For example, this might mean someone is threatened with a job loss, demotion, bad performance reviews, unfavorable shifts, less desirable project assignments, and so on. Now, a single incident of quid pro quo sexual harassment is illegal and can be the grounds for a lawsuit. With quid pro quo harassment, the employer can be found legally liable for the actions of the supervisor who commits this act because supervisors are deemed to be acting on behalf of the employer. All right, now let's pause for a minute and take a look at this video. It's a sexual harassment skit.
Hi, you wanted to see me?
Wow. Yeah. Have a seat. Just wanted to welcome you to the company. How do you like it here so far?
I like it a lot. Everyone's been really nice and helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, I want all my employees to feel comfortable. Well, if you have any questions at all, just come to my office anytime, alright?
Alright.
Nice to meet you.
It's nice meeting you too.
Alright, well have a good day, okay?
Okay.
Alright. Don't be a stranger.
Bye.
Alright. How's it going?
Good.
Can't help but notice you haven't visited my office lately. Everything alright?
Yeah, I've just been getting the hang of things.
Yeah?
Hmm?
Yeah, well, I haven't got time for you, alright?
Alright.
Have a good one.
You too.
Hey,
Hey.
nice work on that report. It's very well organized. If you keep this up, you'll see big things in your future.
Thank you. I've been working really hard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I recognize your talent, and I think I might even be able to put a good word for your promotion.
Well, that would be amazing.
Hey, no. You know what? Don't worry about it. But hey, I was wondering, do you want to grab a bite to eat sometime? Just be me and you know, lunch, whatever. Nothing serious.
I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that.
Why not? You know, we're getting to know each other.
Well, I have a boyfriend, so...
So I have a girlfriend. I mean, you know, I thought you were trying to take this job seriously, but I guess you don't want that promotion. Never mind.
All right, so now let's move on to our next topic. We're gonna talk about hostile work environment. Hostile work environment is a type of sexual harassment that occurs when there are frequent or pervasive unwanted sexual comments, advances, requests, or other similar conduct. It can also occur when there is other verbal or physical contact that is sexual in nature. This could include displays of inappropriate or offensive materials, sexual jokes, interference with someone's ability to move freely, and persistent unwanted interactions such as asking for dates continually. in general, this type of conduct must be unwelcome and either frequent or pervasive or both to be considered as hostile environment. It is not usually deemed a hostile work environment if the activity in question was an isolated occurrence or a simple attempt at initiating a sexual relationship that was not reciprocated nor repeated. Whether or not this criterion has been met is determined on a case by case basis. Unlike quid pro quo harassment, a hostile work environment does not require any employment benefit to be at risk, since it is not tied to the promise or threat of particular employment actions. This type of sexual harassment is found across all levels of employees. Another important distinction here is that inappropriate behavior between employees may also create a hostile work environment for other employees who are not actually the target of the behavior. In order for the employer to be held liable for hostile work environment harassment that occurs between two employees, neither of whom is a supervisor, typically, it must be shown that the employer either knew or should have known about the situation and did not take necessary steps to stop or prevent it from occurring. If the employer did take immediate steps to stop the situation once it was brought to light, and especially if the employer had also taken steps to prevent it, the employer may have a defense. Um, but if the supervisor is the harasser, however, the employer typically can be held liable by default. Now, let's take a look at different forms of harassment. Harassment may be verbal, from requests for sexual favors, um, making sexual comments, and sexual teasing, threats, or cracking sexual jokes. Harassment may be physical, from unwanted touching, kissing, and harassment can be nonverbal, from lewd gestures and circulating sexual materials and things like that. Now, another form is an after hour harassment. This happens when it's occurring in a work related context within the course and scope of employment. And supervisors particularly vulnerable for in this type of harassment. Of course, in our media driven world and technology driven world, today there are harassment, textual harassment, and electronic harassment that happens via email and text messages, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, etc. Then another form of harassment is paramour based harassment. The victim feels the supervisor is favoring another employee because they're dating each other. So, what should we do? Well, first of all, we should recognize that sexual harassment is a crime. It destabilizes the emotional balance of victim and can have many more serious consequences. But that doesn't mean that you have to be a robot and cannot crack jokes or socialize. We just have to be very, very sensitive on what we're going to say. We just have to think twice before we say something. Um, Not so just, again, for us to be a robot, but for the fact that to come across as respectful to others. Now, who is liable? Well, it depends on who is doing the harassment. Is it a supervisor? Is it a coworker? Is it a non-employee third party? Now, the question becomes, okay, it could be any of these categories of people who could be a harasser, and when will an employer become liable? When are they held liable for this particular misconduct? Well, the employer is strictly liable for supervisor's harassment, period. If it is coming from a supervisor, even if the employer is not aware of the conduct, or let's say the employer disciplines and is aware, or even if it is after hours or off the premises, if the harassment is initiated by a supervisor, then the employer becomes liable by default. And also, if there's a tangible adverse employment action that took place where the victim suffers an significant change in employment status, or had the victim suffers an economic harm. This means the supervisor with this official power of the enterprise use that authority to bring this particular harm on the victim. Then, and if that's called as an adverse tangible employment action, then obviously the employer will be held liable. Now, in case of if the harassment is occurring between coworkers, not necessarily the supervisors involved, but just the coworkers or between non-employees, as we discussed earlier, the third-party harassment, the employer is held liable only if the supervisor knew about it or should have known about the contact and failed to take immediate and appropriate corrective action. And this is the reason why this training is so important, so that you would know that you will be held liable um, for what happens between your coworkers, between coworkers, amongst your subordinates, um, for such conduct. Now, then the question becomes, who is a supervisor? Well, supervisor does not have to be a high level employee such as CEO, director, etc. Supervisor is someone who has the authority to hire or fire, evaluate or discipline, recommend to hire or fire, or direct the work of others. You know, because you immediately think, oh, it's the executives that are called to supervise. That's not the case. Now, the Farragher alert defense is a form of an affirmative defense. So, once you go through all of this, you're thinking, okay, is there any way if we are held liable for everything except for the fact that, it's very subtle, the fine line between what the court is going to view as employer being liable and not being liable. Is there any sort of an affirmative defense that we could use? Of course, there is. There is one. And this can be used to defend against claims of hostile work environment, harassment by supervisors if there is evidence of no tangible adverse action and the employer exercised reasonable care to prevent and promptly correct the harassing behavior. For example, harassment policies demonstrated reasonable care to prevent harassing behavior, and the plaintiff employee unreasonably failed to take advantage of any preventative or corrective opportunities provided by the employer or otherwise avoid harm. Um, for example, by not taking advantage of reporting procedures outlined in an anti harassment policy. So then let's talk about what are the don'ts. Well, the don't do's is that don't ever assume it's okay because the victim did not complain. So let's say you happen to hear something and you're thinking, well, that person did not come and complain or did not file a complaint verbally or written. So I'm gonna assume it's okay. No, no, that's not okay. You should not assume it's okay if the victim did not complain. Don't assume that the complaint is bogus either because the victim delayed in reporting. So they're coming and reporting and it happened like 6 months ago and you're like, well, this is like 6 months ago. It's considered bogus and it's not. And don't assume it's okay because the victim played along too, because that could be an easy trap because you could think like, okay, the victim played along, so it should be okay. It's not, because there are reasons why sometimes victims don't come forward. They might be confused, they might be embarrassed to share this, they might have guilty conscience, they shame, sometimes denial. They just don't know how to react. So okay, I'm gonna just act like nothing happened, just simply denying it. There may be fear. Am I gonna lose my job? sometimes adaptation. They're like, okay, I'm going to adapt myself to this because I really need to keep this job. And sometimes they're numbed. They just they just don't know how to react. They just don't know what to do. And sometimes it's between same sex and they don't know how do I what could happen if I ever report this, you know? So these could be the reasons why they're not coming forward. So, and if they ever come forward, never ever ever discourage or blame the victim, period. Assume Do not assume that these discussions that you're holding with the victim is off the record. It's on the record. Once they happen to share it, once you happen to know it, it's on the record. And do not try to handle it yourself, because you need to make sure that whoever who needs to know about this, especially in the executive level, they know about these situations and these scenarios. So do not handle it yourself. So moving on to that poses the question, okay, this is all happening. Now I've got an employee or who's in my office and we've got this thing happening. How do I go about this? Who should investigate this? Well, human resources, a general counsel, an outside counsel, a professional investigator, all of these categories of people can investigate into the case. So let's talk about the protocol for addressing these complaints. Now, the first and foremost thing that you should do is that you should acknowledge the seriousness. As soon as someone complains something, take it with, be serious about it, you know, and listen carefully to the complaint without making judgments about the truth or validity of allegations. Because it's easy for us to, everyone uses their judgment skills, and it's natural. So you get biased, and so it's natural, it's given, everyone does it. So when such a complaint is filed, it's very important that you listen to that complaint without making any judgments, and ensure confidentiality. So whoever is reporting this, make sure that they understand 100% that you will try your level best to keep it, to maintain the confidentiality of the matter, and emphasize that the first desired response is to seek an informal remedy and resolution if possible and appropriate. Let the person know that the employer has both informal and formal procedures for dealing with allegations of harassment. And if you, as a supervisor, is uncertain about this, please consult with human resources. Ask the person what they want to be done. Um, and again, always document all of these things as you're listening and as you take down notes and document it. Um, Assure them that there is no retaliation. It's very important. Can't stress enough that you would tell them and communicate clearly that there will be no retaliation, because it is, as we discussed, go further down this training, you will realize that retaliation is one of the most rising type of claim that is now in this country. So it's a topic of sensitivity. So assure them that there will be no retaliation. And if uncertain, let the person know that you will definitely respond, but you would want to consult with appropriate parties and follow up immediately. Okay. And another thing is that when you are interviewing alleged harasser, remain calm, focus on the facts, encourage confidentiality, and do not tolerate retaliation. So you need to make sure that the alleged harasser know that that our company will not tolerate retaliation at all. And then while you're interviewing witnesses, reassure witnesses that you will maintain confidentiality as much as possible, to the extent that is possible, and let them know about retaliation as well, so that they will feel comfortable in sharing everything, and at the same time they will feel comfortable to work after sharing anything that they've witnessed. All right, so let's move on to your then our next topic of discussion. So what happens after you did all the investigation? Well, you'll have only there will be only three possible outcomes. Inconclusive, harassment did occur, and no finding of alleged action. So if it is inconclusive, then remind everyone about the policy, and you can explore non-punitive solutions like scheduling or training, um, monitoring, or have a sit and have a chat, um, and let them, whoever that is, know how important this is, so that you can have their attention to the matter and remind them of the policy and whatnot. Now, if the harassment did occur, then determine what appropriate action to take. And we'll discuss how we're going to determine that, advise the victim and the harasser of the determination, follow up with them. And if there is no finding of alleged action, then confirm that there were no complaints, confirm that the complainant is satisfied, and follow up with them. Now, as I said, how do you determine what type of an action is correct? Well, first of all, you look at the case, and uh, the disciplinary action ranges from verbal to termination, and it should be proportional to the seriousness of conduct and reasonably calculated. So whatever action that you're going to take, it should be reasonably calculated in such a way that its end goal is to end the harassment and discourage harasser or anybody else from practicing such unlawful conduct in the workplace. Now let's talk about retaliation. I said this is very, very important because retaliation has suddenly become a rapid rising risk for employers. Recently, across the business landscape, there have been a flood of new retaliation claims by disgruntled workers. In 2010, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission received nearly 100,000 charges of discrimination. What was incredible is that 36% of these accusations specifically were charges of retaliation. Um, and in the light of the recent court decisions, expand the definition of workplace retaliation, more and more employers are finding themselves in unexpected trouble. This trouble is caused by the fact that more and more once harmless activities are being placed under the umbrella of this definition of retaliation. Now, the definition says retaliation means to take an adverse employment action against an employee because the employee engaged in what is defined as protected activity. In a classic example, an employee is terminated because they complained about sexual harassment in the workplace. Although such an employee has become more defined in recent years, any practical definition of protected activity goes well beyond this point. It has come to mean anything that the employee does that is legally protected. Um, and the protected activity can come under the umbrella of demanding overtime or filing for workers' comp benefits, taking time off that is permitted for maternity leave or bereavement. Um, in addition, any other activity that is protected under federal and state laws is under the umbrella as well. So, unlike in the past, an employee no longer needs to complain in writing to have their actions categorized under this umbrella of retaliation um, to be protected. So then you might think, okay, how do I? We're gonna a little bit look further into affirmative defenses that we can use. Now there are um, four um, defenses that you can use. Statute of limitations. Well, in federal level, it's 180 days. And then sexual harassment statute of limitations in California is that a victim must file a charge of discrimination with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing within 1 year from the date of the last incident of sexual harassment. And failure to exhaust administrative remedies is the next one. It is the employee's burden to prove that he or she timely exhausted her or his administrative remedies by filing a DFEH complaint and receiving a right to sue letter. The third one, affirmative defense that we can use, is avoidable consequence doctrine. Under this doctrine, as recognized in California, a person injured by another's wrongful conduct will not be compensated for those damages that the injured person could have avoided by reasonable effort. This defense has three elements to it. And the first one is that the employer took reasonable steps to prevent harassment. The second one is employer unreasonably failed to sue the preventative and corrective measures that the employer provided. And the third one is reasonable use of the employer's procedures would have prevented at least some of the harm that the employee suffered. The fourth type of affirmative defense is that not sufficiently severe or pervasive. To make this determination, the court considers the following factors. Factor number one, the frequency of the conduct. Factor number two, the severity of the conduct. Factor number three, whether the conduct is physically threatening or humiliating or mere offensive utterance. And factor number four, whether the conduct unreasonably interferes with the employee's job performance. The court must look at the totality of the circumstances and view the harassing conduct in context, not as isolated acts. So then, what is the supervisor's responsibility to prevent harassment? Well, inform all employees that sexual harassment is prohibited by the employer policy and it's illegal. Educate employees and distribute employer policies on sexual harassment. Encourage an open door policy so anybody can feel free to come and talk with you about it, discuss about it, and report anything that they see. Do not condone the conduct. Um, this is your responsibility. And then what are the warning signs? Because you're like, okay, I've got things to do. What if the victim, for the reasons that we just discussed about a while ago, that they're not coming forward and telling all of these things? Um, how do I know? What do I do if they don't share these things? Well, as a supervisor, if you notice the following behavioral patterns among your staff, then take a moment to have a sit down and chat with them by asking them if all is well with them or not in terms of their employment. Um, and the signs that you should be on the lookout for is changes in their work habit, behavior, or in their appearance, increase in absenteeism, recurring health problems. If you observe any of these things, then um, most likely you should. It is very important that you should have a chat with them. Now, and the thing is, as a supervisor, take responsibility for this type of behavior in workplace. Respect each and every one. Think before you speak. Because sometimes, we tend to think, get comfortable, and might think as though we are sharing it with our own family, and that might not be the case because it's culturally diverse workforce, and we need to think before we speak because sometimes what might be appropriate in our culture most likely is not appropriate in other culture. So um, and our goal is to be respectful to each other. So think before you speak and apologize if you offend someone. Avoid joking about sensitive topics as well. Um, and another thing that we all could use is a personal behavior checklist. And these questions that you see on the screen listed is very, very beneficial because the first thing that you need to ask is, does this behavior contribute to getting our goals or work accomplished? Okay, that is the first question. Then, could this behavior be interpreted as harmful or harassing by an onlooker? Third question is, would I engage in this behavior if it were going to be published in an employer's newsletter? Ooh, that is something that you'll think twice about it. And would I engage in this behavior if my significant other or my children were present? It's a very good question too, because that will kind of like help us on maybe not, maybe yes, in between. If it's in between, you still should consider it as a no. All right, let's look at this case study now. And this is Theo is Sabrina's new supervisor. Now, Sabrina finds a note from Theo on her desk. It says, I would like to have more than a professional relationship with you. Can we go out sometime soon and get to know each other better? Sabrina has no interest and says no to Theo about the note. Theo subsequently ceases all personal communication with Sabrina. He directs verbal communication through co-workers and begins to make assignments and critique her work through written memos. He calls staff meetings when she's out of the office so that she does not learn of policy and procedural changes. Now, is this sexual harassment? Yes or no? And obviously, in the light of all we've talked about, it is a sexual harassment. So, that pretty much, we're gonna watch a video right now to recap on everything that we talked about, and hopefully um, this will kind of concrete all the uh, points that are relevant in regards with this topic.
Harassment is illegal and not tolerated in any workplace. Harassment can inflict serious damage on an organization's productivity and morale. It causes absenteeism, employee turnover, depression, illness, embarrassment, and humiliation. And an individual named in a harassment complaint could lose their job, their reputation, and even their career. Workplace harassment occurs when people are treated poorly or unfairly because of a perceived difference. Court rulings have established protected groups that are afforded legal protection from workplace harassment. These groups are defined by race, color, and national origin, religion, either because of a person's faith or beliefs, or pressure to join or convert to a faith, disability, either mental or physical, family status, which includes marital status and pregnancy, gender, age for employees 40 and over, and sexual orientation. In addition, local laws and organizational policies prohibit the harassment of many other groups of employees. To put it simply, harassment of any type is unacceptable. When harassing conduct is continuous and unwanted, it can result in illegal harassment. This type of harassment is called hostile environment, and it occurs when the conduct unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Harassing jokes, comments, or other behaviors can create a hostile work environment, even if they aren't directly targeted at the individual making the harassment complaint. Harassment is not limited to just coworkers. It can also occur with individuals not directly employed by an organization. Individuals such as patients, contractors, consultants, delivery persons, salespersons, vendors, and customers. Harassment can occur anywhere that an employee represents their organization. This includes work parties, dinner with clients, conferences, trade shows, sales calls, and charity events. In order to define harassing behavior, the courts have adopted the reasonable person standard. In other words, would a reasonable person find the behavior offensive? The following behaviors are unacceptable in any workplace and could lead to illegal harassment. Verbal, physical, or cyber bullying, including ridicule, mockery, insults, put-downs, threats, or physically blocking a person's movement or ability to work. The use of demeaning or offensive names, such as towelhead, homo, or sweetheart, or the use of slurs or epithets like, "You Jews are sure tight with money." Gossiping or spreading rumors about coworkers. Telling insensitive jokes that are demeaning or degrading to a particular race, culture, sex, or any other protected group. Menacing looks or gestures intended to threaten, intimidate, or humiliate a coworker. Sexual harassment, which includes any continuous, unwanted behavior of a sexual nature, whether physical, visual, or verbal. Making disparaging comments about a person's job ability, such as, "He is too old to understand technology." Excluding or isolating someone from work-related activities and assignments because of a non-work-related reason, like their race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. Sending offensive or harassing emails, viewing offensive websites, and using social networking sites for harassing or offensive behavior. Texting pictures, messages, or videos that offend, denigrate, or harass a coworker. Harassment has consequences. Harassment can result in disciplinary actions, including written warnings, suspension, demotion, and even termination. It's also illegal to retaliate for a harassment complaint. This can also lead to disciplinary actions up to and including termination. What can you do to prevent harassment? It's simple. Leave offensive behaviors at the door. Treat everyone with respect and speak up when you see harassment. Studies show that simply asking the harasser to stop will end the harassment 90% of the time. However, if you are not comfortable confronting the harasser, or if the harassing behavior continues, you should contact a manager, supervisor, or the Human Resources Department. If the harassment is physically aggressive or threatening in nature, it should be reported immediately to management or human resources. Every employee deserves a safe, comfortable environment at work, a workplace free of harassment and fear, and full of respect. It's up to everyone to do their part in preventing harassment.
All right, let's move on to part two of workplace bullying. Now, workplace bullying, what we're going to discuss here is we're going to define, we're going to look at the definition, we're going to look at the categories, we're going to look at the examples, look at the statistical studies and the statistics about what the data uh, that can give us idea and understanding about this topic, how bullying happens, who gets targeted, the experiences at work the victims suffer from getting while they're getting bullied, and how to prevent it, what you can do if you're being bullied, if you see others being bullied, you can help, and the case study, of course. So, effective January 1st of 2015, AB 2053 mandates California employers with 50 or more employees add anti-bullying training into their current sexual harassment training curriculum. This training must be provided to all supervisory employees within the first 6 months of assuming supervisory role. And that is the reason why we have included this in our harassment training. And the definition is that conduct of an employer or employee in the workplace with malice that a reasonable person would find hostile, offensive, and unrelated to an employer's legitimate business interests. Abusive conduct may include repeated infliction of verbal abuse, such as the use of derogatory remarks, insults, and epithets. Verbal or physical contact that a reasonable person would find threatening, intimidating, or humiliating, or the gratuitous sabotage or undermining of a person's work performance. A single act shall not constitute abusive conduct unless especially severe or egregious. And it's very important to. Um, Now, let's talk a little bit further about workplace bullying. That because some of you may ask this question, why is this a big deal? As we go on to statistics, we will find out why this is a matter of significance in this era. Workplace bullying has become a silent epidemic in North America, one that has a huge hidden cost in terms of employee well being and productivity. Also known as psychological harassment or emotional abuse, bullying involves the conscious repeated effort to wound and seriously harm another person, not with violence, but with words and actions. Bullying damages the physical, emotional, and mental health of the person who is targeted. The workplace bully abuses power, brings misery to his or her target, and endeavors to steal the target's self confidence. Bullies often involve others using many tactics such as blaming for errors, unreasonable work demands, insults, put downs, stealing credit, threatening job loss, and discounting accomplishments. Bullying is often directed at someone a bully feels threatened by. The target often doesn't even realize when they're being bullied because the behavior is covered through trivial criticisms and isolating actions that occur behind closed doors. So, what are the categories of bullying? Well, there are three: verbal bullying, physical bullying, and gesture bullying. And some of the examples of verbal bullying is slandering, ridiculing, maligning a person of his or her family, um, insulting, humiliating, abusive jokes and offensive remarks. Physical bullying involves pushing, shoving, kicking, gesture bullying, like nonverbal threatening justice. So these are some of the examples of, sorry, categories of bullying. Then what are the different types of office bullying? Well, office bullying has become a common concern of many human resource professionals during the last decade or so. As more studies into the dynamics of workplace harassment and bullying have taken place, several types of office bullies have been identified. In fact, some office bullies may appear somewhat benign at first, with the fruits of their destructive behavior only manifesting after a prolonged period of subtle workplace intimidation. One of the more obvious examples of office bullying is the aggressive bully. Bullies of this type actively look for ways to unsettle others in the workplace. People who engage in this type of behavior stands a little too close, speaks a little too loud, and generally do everything in their power to rattle thought process and prevent victims from gathering their wits in order to fight off their intimidation. If left unchecked, bullies of this type are likely to progress from verbal abuse to physical types of workplace violence. A subtle type of office bullying is sometimes known as smart bullying. An individual engaging in this type of intimidation often considers himself or herself to be an expert on just about any subject and is not shy about sharing that knowledge with everyone else. Often, the tone used to deliver this knowledge is calculated to imply that the recipient lacks knowledge or skill necessary to assimilate the data and be efficient around the office, thus undermining the confidence of others. Rarely does the smart bully attack another individual with harsh words or other forms of direct verbal assaults. Instead, the bullying slowly erodes the confidence and enthusiasm of others in the workplace and may result in poor employee performance or the company losing employees that would have been assets in other circumstances. Now, the third type of office bully is the elite bully. Elite bully uses a method of intimidation that includes snubbing and shunning others or making it a point to let others know that they are not as good as the bully in some manner. The bullying may have to do with the way someone dresses or talks, or the salary or wages earned by a given employee. The snobbery can even extend to factors such as someone's race, gender, sexual orientation, or religious preference. In some cases, the allied bully will point out how his or her attributes are inherently superior to everyone else in the office, sometimes in exquisite detail. At other times, the snobbery will be obvious but communicated non-verbally. In all its forms, office bullying weakens the efficiency of the workplace, usually by creating divisions within the office as well as undermining the confidence and performance of specific employees. Anyone from a department manager or supervisor to the receptionist can be the origin of bullying in the workplace. When behavior of this type is identified in any employee, steps to counsel and rehabilitate the employee should be taken place immediately. Should those efforts fail to produce a change, the bully should be strongly encouraged to seek work opportunities elsewhere as soon as possible and be terminated as a means of assisting the bully in moving forward with that search. Now, let's take let's review some examples uh, of workplace bullying. So the constant singling out of one person, persistent and in public, and then shouting or raising a voice, using obscene and threatening gestures, personal insults, public humiliation, constant criticism on matters unrelated to a person's job performance or description, ignoring or interrupting an individual at meetings, public reprimands, spreading rumors and gossip regarding one or more individuals, pressuring another to disregard company directions, impairing someone's ability to do his or her work, refusing reasonable request for time off, um, even when such a refusal to take time off is not justifiable, or unwanted physical touch, retaliation, making accusation without proof. All of this are examples of bullying. And one might think, why do employers do so little about it? According to WBI, our society is an individualistic society that feeds aggression and competition in workplace, one that has no place for empathy, concern for the well-being of others. Studies reveal that majority of the bullies are bosses. Bullies derive support from HR, and some bullies target employees upon receiving command from executives. Thus, these bullies become good soldiers following all orders in a blind fashion. And in majority of the case, trainings that provide anti-bullying awareness is non-existent, and executives um, just deny responsibility by blaming the problem on few bad apples. Now, WBI in 2014 put out the statistics on workplace bullying, and they say 56% of bullying is coming top down, 33 between coworkers, and 11% bottom up. And around bosses are still majority of the bullies, and 72% of employers deny, discount, encourage, rationalize, or defend it. It's an interesting data. Um, and then if we look at this particular state, the states are now moving towards considering workplace bullying as a real serious scenario in the workplace. Now, they also did study between the gender bullying, and they figured this is the statistics that they came up with, that 69% of them are male bullies and 31 female bullies. Now, male bullies, of course, they target 57%. They they target females more than men, but male targets stands around 43. Now, if you look at female bullies, there's a drastic difference there. Female bullies 68% of the time. bully other females, and 32% they focus on males. Now, this video was published on November 7th of 2014. It explores women on women bullying. Let's watch it together.
When it comes to their professional lives, it can be hard for women to get the same opportunities as men. But it's not just men who create barriers. Researchers say sometimes it's women. Women business owners in Philadelphia work the room. Behind each laugh and smile is an opportunity to connect and grow.
There are opportunities to create team. We have team right here.
But Hope Felcher Horwitz says she wasn't always supported this way. At an old job, she says another woman and her female conspirator forced her out.
I thought she was on my team, and I couldn't believe when I found out that the two of them had been ganging up on me.
It's nothing new. A 2014 survey by Workplace Bullying Institute found when women bully, their target is another woman 68% of the time.
For some reason, in my experience, women don't always support women.
Alexandra Eidenberg, who owns an insurance company, thought she'd get a fair shake from a female-owned business. They praised her proposal, but passed on her anyway.
We're not moving forward with you because you're a mom, and it kills me because they had every opportunity to empower another woman and chose not to.
The fewer women around, the worse it can get. A 2012 George Mason University study showed when a workplace has few women, those women help each other less.
Women are less supportive of other women in conditions where they're both underrepresented in a workplace and feel that there are only a few opportunities for advancement.
Mazda Miles, an event organizer from Drexel Hill, says she's seen it happen in corporate life.
A lot of times it was like, this is my only shot, and so you are now, my enemy, you are now my competition, and it's unfortunate.
When they support you, they're fabulous, and when they don't, it's high school and get out of the way.
These women say they're dedicated to being grown-ups who grow business for everyone.
I've been in business for 45 years now. It has changed a lot, and it's getting better.
You're rising above, and you're bringing someone with you.
And researchers say women who avoid helping other women often do it unconsciously. They might fear the competition or worry that helping another woman could jeopardize their status. Now, we do have resources available on cbsphilly.com. Just search women.
So now you might think, what are the traits of a bully? We're going to look into the traits of an individual bully and as an organization. So individual bullies, they're hyper vigilant regarding environmental threats. What that means is they know everything that goes about. They're very sensitive, they're very observative, they're always looking out, especially if they have a target. They're always focusing on the target's behavior, on the target's what the target is doing, everything that goes around the target. They're hyper vigilant. They're highly unstable. And so you can see that in their behavioral patterns. And they have very high self-esteem. They have little or no ability to experience empathy. And they have low self-control. And majority of them, based on the studies by WBI, have type A personality. And these bullies may have a past of experiencing domestic violence, or they may have been a victim of child abuse, or acting out as a schoolyard bully, or have a background in alcohol and drug abuse, or simply it's an effort to gain political power within the organization. Let's look at the organization as a whole. Now, the organizations where you found bullies, if you look at carefully, these organizations have have a hard-driving competitive culture and inspiring terror by abusing/ridiculing employees, a misguided but common notion of how to motivate workers. So basically they believe you can only motivate a worker by intimidating them or telling them that they are, um, you know, not up to and they have to be competitive and whatnot. But it's done in an abusive fashion. Now, companies that hire bullies find their behavior acceptable and may even seek them out to whip their company into shape. And if you look at these companies who has bullies or who encourage bullying, they are very disorganized. They're not the companies that kind of follow everything by the books. They're highly disorganized. They kind of want to run the organization the way they want it, with no structure or least amount of structure. The morale is low, teamwork is not encouraged, um, and increased pressure to produce when there's downsizing or layoff within the company. It increases pressure, and this also, then the competition starts, and that pretty much will motivate bullying behavior to bubble up to the surface. Um, these type of organizations will have an autocratic, authoritarian, authoritarian leadership style, um, and feelings of job insecurity, and the restructuring, downsizing, organizational changes. All this can factor into um, motivating bullies and such conduct in the workplace. Now, who gets to be the target? When WBI did the study on the behavior that they find in these targets or victims are really most commonly they're non-confrontative. They don't confront anything. They're very silent people. They do not respond to aggression with aggression. They just sit there. And but the price paid for the apparent submissiveness is that the bully can act with impunity. The most easily exploited targets are people with personalities founded on a pro-social orientation, a desire to help, heal, teach, develop, and nurture others. Okay, so now we want to know, what do these targets experience at work? And we have a list in front of us, and it could be where this target is given a new job without training or time to learn that new skill, and they're trying their level best to do the job, but the job is never good enough for the boss. And then all of a sudden, they're called into surprise meetings, where the intent is to humiliate and tell them that they're not good enough, um, and with no results. And Everything the tormentor or the bully does is arbitrary and capricious, and others are told not to talk or socialize or have been asked to stop working with the victim or the target. So the bully pretty much tells employees to stop working with them or talking with them and socializing with them. And the victim feels agitated and anxious and experience a sense of doom, waiting for bad things to happen. And no matter what the victim do or does, they're never left alone to do their job without interference. It's constantly whatever they do, the bully often finds something to always nitpick on, um, and literally trying to, as we discussed earlier, to rattle their confidence, tell them that you know, that they're not good enough to do the job. And people feel justified screaming or yelling at the victim in front of others, but if the victim or the target ever stands up, then they're being punished for it. And HR tells, work it out between yourself. It isn't illegal. So there you go. Um, and finally, if the victim ever confront the tormentor or the bully and ask him to stop, then the bully turns around and tells the victim or the target that they are the one who did that, um, and accuse the victim and the target that they're the ones who are bullying the bully. And the victim, they're they they're shocked when they're told that they're accused when they're accused of incompetence, despite a history of objective excellence in other jobs, or you know uh, previously if they had a good reputation, um, and everyone, coworkers and bosses and HR, tells the victim that, yeah, this person is a jerk, but then they don't do anything about it. And then when the victim asks for a transfer, they are pretty much mysteriously denied. Now, how do you prevent this? Well, one of the ways is to provide workplace bullying training during new hire orientation. When new hires come on board, you train them and tell them we have zero tolerance for workplace bullying. Um, and they'll know that this is a culture, and right away know that how important treating each other with respect is for our organization. And also, you as a supervisor, now that you know the behavioral patterns, you can be, it's easier for you to identify bullying patterns as it comes to your attention. So as soon as you see it, um, you'll know, okay, this is bullying. I'm gonna document this. I'm gonna have a chat with this particular person or the bully and provide counseling to this particular person and let them know about the policies and procedures. And this is so important that you know about your policies and procedures regarding bullying and harassment, because if you don't know, you are not in a place to let them know, like, this um, is against our policies. And so you need to know about the anti-bullying, workplace anti-bullying policy that our company has. And so you can point those behaviors that are listed down there and tell them, can you see this? This is considered as bullying, and we don't tolerate this. So going forward, we don't want to do this or practice this, or we want to be sensitive around this. And I mean, sometimes the people, they come from different background and upbringing and culture, and so they don't necessarily mean sometimes to do this, and it just comes out naturally. And so when you sit down and have a chat with them and tell them that these are the behaviors that are considered as bullying, then they don't actually, they're aware of it all of a sudden. They're like, oh, I never thought that this was bullying. I thought it was normal and okay. I mean, I was raised this way, and it was pretty normal for us, but I didn't know it's normal. So you'll be surprised by the kind of response you get when you sit down and have a chat, and that right there it's an easy way to bring this awareness to them and prevent it. And in case if you have an employee who still um, does not want to comply, now that they're aware of it, but they still continue in that pattern, even consciously, because they know already that this is considered as workplace bullying and they don't want to follow that, then you have to take the disciplinary measures for it so they won't repeat it. And also, another way to prevent it is letting your employees, your staff members, know that they are protected from retaliation. Because when you let your staff members know that they are protected, they don't feel like they have to hide, and they will come and tell you, hey, I see this is happening and I need your help, I need your support, so they come forward and talk to you about it instead of keeping it to themselves, and you as a supervisor is blindsided by all these things that is happening and eventually getting pulled into something that you're totally you were totally you didn't even know that was happening. And so these are by having that transparency and letting the employees know that they're protected from reporting any such incidents. Right there is you're opening up your door so that they can come and talk to you and feel free and have that freedom and security. So when they come and tell you these things, you can immediately take the measure and eradicate any such behavior from your department. So um, that really helps to prevent workplace bullying. Now, this might also, the points that you see on the screen right now, it's kind of looks like a repetition of what I just said, but it's reiterating how important um, it is to know about the policies that we have in place, and to encourage your employees to report anything that they experience or witness. And any complaints that come to your attention must be taken very seriously and investigated promptly, because now that it's been defined into the regulation, courts are definitely going to look into how fast and how serious we consider these allegations or complaints that was brought into your attention. Did you investigate it promptly? Did you take it seriously? What are the steps you took? And do we have a policy in place that helps you understand and take the necessary steps that is required for you to do it? To required steps that are necessary um, to to help you investigate and stop this problem in the workplace. And another way to prevent any sort of bullying behavior at workplace is to engage employees in decision-making process, because by doing so you're getting input from all of your staff members rather than taking an input from one person or one employee. One of the factors that they say for bullying behavior to bubble up or to motivate bullying behavior in the workplace is that you create a situation or a scenario where only that one particular person has gotten input into a project, and the rest everyone just gets to stand by and watch without even having an opportunity to give their 2 cents into the project. So when you involve too many people, you're actually setting everyone up for success, not just one person. So that kind of motivates teamwork instead of just one person monopolizing an entire project. And awareness, bringing awareness. Obviously, we talked about it during orientation. Um, HR plays a huge role in training employees and setting up a stage to let them know, like, here we respect each other in this organization. We value different cultures and people from different background, and there is zero tolerance for workplace bullying. So you're making them aware of it, and another way is ensure management has an active part in the staff they supervise, rather than being far removed from them, which is basically what we talked about a little while ago, that you engage actively, you know your people, you are observing the patterns, the behaviors. You have an open door policy where they are comfortable to come to you and talk to you about anything and everything that they feel that they want to talk to you about, and they want support from you. Um, and whenever anything is presented to you, especially complaints, then you investigate it um, right away. And it says here conduct employee attitude surveys, and it's not literally like you're sitting there and doing a survey on their attitude. But now that you've taken this training, you know the behavioral patterns, you know the attitudes that come from a workplace bully. So it's when you engage in conversations, or when you review emails, or when you see messages, or when you listen to somebody, you can immediately, like, you have this because you took this training, you have this at the back of your mind, that, oh, okay, that comes across to me as a form of bullying. They're putting down in their conversation somebody else, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing to do. So maybe they're just doing it for one time, or if it's continuous, and if you feel like their way of expressing things about one particular individual is always negative or putting them down, and you kind of start feeling, okay, I need to maybe just pay a little bit more attention to this. Are they comfortable? And if they're not comfortable, why aren't they comfortable? You as a manager, you have a huge responsibility in leading your team in such a way that everyone feels comfortable with you. And if there is, personality clashes in workplace is very common. So you get to watch this. Now you have been trained, you have an understanding, and so you get to sit with them and kind of remove all those obstacles, and shed some light onto the thought process of two people that might be facing this, where one is a target and other is a bully, and you as a leader sitting there and you're watching this and you're trying to get an understanding. We know why bullies act that way. Maybe they want political power, or maybe they have been a victim of abuse, or maybe there are other factors that goes into it. So you have an understanding now, and you're trying to the motivation for you here is to help both of them, both the bully and the victim, to resolve the conflict in a healthy manner. And it is only when the bully still continues, that they don't want to correct it, they want to still continue in that pattern, then you take the disciplinary measure that we talked about before. And just resolving the conflict and responding to the conflict, it's very important. And also, you don't have to feel like you're left alone with this, because sometimes the procedures are a little bit more complicated, and if ever you feel like, okay, I tried everything, and at this point I want to reach out to human resources, employees do have the options to reach out to human resources to get that help. So that is where human resources, another name, of course, it's human relations. So that is these are all measures that is made available, and tips that you can use to prevent workplace bullying. Now, what can you do if you're being bullied? Now, this is good that you go over this, because this may be a question that you may be asked by one of your employees. Can come, hey, what can I do if I'm being bullied? And you need to know this. Well, first of all, acknowledge that this is happening, and it starts with the decision that you make that you are going to do something about it and not just remain silent. Report the behavior to the appropriate manager in the workplace. So this is something that you have to take notes down on this, so that you can give it to your employees, and your employees will know that if they happen to be bullied, these are the procedures that they can do. Keep a record of the bullying. Take down notes of on time and date and location and any witnesses, and address your concerns with the bully if suitable, and ask them to stop. You know, um, and when you watch the video, you'll see how you can look them in the eye and ask them, please stop. This is making me feel intimidated. This is not helping me. And seek help and advice at work. In the workplace, you may have a workplace bullying policy. Of course, our company has a procedure, and there is human resources who can assist in resolving the matter, either informally or formally. So there's that opportunity available for all your employees, and you can tell them that if they're being bullied, there are these options, and they have employee assistance program to seek psychological help and support, and of course government agencies available for them to report this, and legal advice from an employment lawyer as well. So they have all these options, informal and formal options, so that they're protected from getting bullied and retaliated. Now, what would you do if you see someone getting bullied? Well, report the behavior to the appropriate manager. So this might be a question that you may have yourself, or others may come, your staff members will come and ask you. Advise the bully to cease the behavior. Never participate in or endorse the bullying behavior. Show constructive support to the colleagues affected by this, to the victims. Tell them that you see what is happening, and this behavior must not be tolerated. So you're offering your support, and because most likely people see this is happening, but they don't want to talk about it because they're scared. But the moment you start talking about it, you start showing your support, it changes the entire culture of the organization, if the organization is operating in such conduct. Now, seek help and advice at work if you feel upset or angry about bullying, by contacting Employee Assistance Program, Human Resources, or your manager. And this is why it's so important that you get to know you know your staff members, so that they feel comfortable to come to you. This is another video that um, uh, that shows about workplace bullying, that kind of talks about. So let's watch this video together, um, so that we are aware of the traumatizing experience that victims and targets go through at workplace.
And the topic is bullying in the workplace. and destroys organizations. And it is a $1.5 trillion drain on the North American economy. It is one of the biggest societal and economic issues of this generation. And yet, it is still under the radar, gets scant media attention, and is generally considered acceptable. Each and every day, millions of people spend most of their waking hours terrorized because of the verbal, psychological, physical, sexual, and cyber aggression that they must endure at work. Now, to put my talk into some context, let me tell you a story. Earlier this year, I gave a talk on the topic. And afterwards, someone in the audience came to me, who I will call John, and asked if he could contact me to discuss what his spouse, who I will call Helen, was going through at work, indicating to me what I was describing was exactly what Helen was going through. 10 days later, I received a call from John. He reminded me of our brief discussion at the event and tearfully expressed remorse and regret in not calling me earlier. Because a few days earlier, Helen committed suicide. Senior management, human resources, and the union failed to support and represent her despite her 20-plus years of unblemished service, only to protect her tormentor, who had a reputation of doing the same thing with others. Helen was told to suck it up, that her tormentor was only doing his job, correcting her deficiencies. And if they had to choose between her and the bully, they would choose the bully. Helen was obviously traumatized to the point that she saw no way out. And in deference to her memory and the stigma attached to suicide, Helen's death was labeled, quote, died suddenly, allowing the bully, the union, and management to get away with manslaughter. Helen's suicide is not isolated or unique. We just don't hear about it. Because like John, most family members want to shield their loved ones from the stigma of suicide. Occasionally, the stories do get told because the act is committed in public. Here are two recent examples. Late last year, Carrie Tesney, a 45-year-old employee with UPS in Birmingham, Alabama, with 21 years service, was fired, and he reacted by killing two of his supervisors before killing himself. A union representative alleges that Carey was driven to this because he was bullied. Just this last January, Philip Piera, a Fox News producer in Austin, Texas, went to the Fox headquarters in Manhattan, handed out cards alleging he was bullied by Fox, and then, in spectacular fashion, took out a gun and shot himself to death. Helen, Carey, and his victims, Philip, and the many, many other tragic ends could have been avoided if families, co-workers, and others close to them recognized what they were going through and intervened. Everyone in this room today, everyone you know, and everyone they know, has or knows someone who went through the horror of being targeted. So how and why did I get personally interested in this issue? Well, let me tell you my story. Early in my career, Bob McCutcheon, who was a senior executive at Loblaw, appeared in my office one morning. He sat down, took out his pipe. Now, I'm aging myself by they allowed smoking back then. As he prepared his pipe, which was a very long, drawn-out process, he said, "Son, I have a problem. You see, there's a young manager. He is cocky, overly aggressive to the point of being abrasive, not sensitive to others, unreasonably demanding, doesn't listen to others, and bullies people to get things done. And I am totally perplexed as to what to do." Now, I was flattered that Bob, who was considered the senior statesman, or godfather, if you will, at Loblaw, would come to me with such a weighty issue. I quickly said, "Well, I'd fire the SOB." Now, after taking a long drag from his pipe, Bob responded by saying, "Well, son, you're the SOB I'm talking about." Thankfully, Bob did not take my advice, but it was a wake-up call that fortunately came early for me in my career. This intervention by Bob taught me that respect is a far more powerful motivator than fear, and it became the most important lesson in leadership and made me successful beyond my wildest dreams. More importantly, throughout my career, I influenced countless cultural changes or transformations, enabling employees to reach their full potential in psychologically safe and positive work environments. But my story does not end here. Even though I have dealt with countless bullying situations over my career, nothing prepared me for being on the receiving end of being targeted. Late in my career, I blew the whistle on a corrupt executive who retaliated against me. And for over a year, I was subjected to vicious attempts to discredit me. My emails and phones were hacked. A private investigator was hired to find dirt on me, which hopefully, given all the time and effort, they found some. I was blacklisted. Associates shunned me for fear of being retaliated against, and I even received an anonymous death threat. Because of this, my physical and mental health deteriorated. I lost over 30 pounds, which I could ill afford to do. I was laid up for 6 months with a serious case of shingles, and I had symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, 95% of people who go through serious bullying suffer from PTSD. Now, thanks to the interventions of others who recognized my deterioration, forced me, with the help of others, to realize I was not alone. I was not at fault. And there were methods by which to positively deal with the harassment, which I did to my satisfaction. But even though I resolved my situation, I could not find closure. This negative energy totally absorbed me, and to this day, I am still haunted by it. Finding closure, I have found, is what most who are targeted face, even many years after the bullying has stopped. I desperately needed to shift the negative energy into something positive, which is what propelled me to expose the horror that so many face and the catastrophic outcomes. So 5 years ago, I started doing extensive research on the topic, and then commenced to interview just under 300 employees and 200 executives. What I found was appalling. It outraged me. This research, augmented with my own considerable experience on the topic, turned into a book called The Bully's Trap. Now, who are the bullies and why do they bully? Now, most people can relate to bullying in schools because of the publicity surrounding the suicides. But while there are similarities, there are differences. And the most significant being the ways and means of bullying are usually more subtle and more complex. But most significantly, bullies are vested with real power and control. Bullies are masters of deflection, deception, manipulation. The reason they bully is simply because they can. In all too many organizations, bullying is allowed, condoned, accepted, rewarded, and in many instances, expected. In many cases, bullies are viewed as star performers or even heroes. In over 70% of the cases, it is the boss to subordinate. They assert power and control through abuse, both sexually and otherwise. And often the reason is to get rid of them by firing them or getting them to quit. Bullies come across as being confident. Their behaviors are often a mask for their insecurity, and they target those who are a threat to them. Most surprisingly is how targets can go from being solid, hard-working, committed employees to becoming poor employees with a poor performance, with bad attitudes in a relatively short period of time. The reason is the bullies set the target up for failure and harass them to the point they lose faith and confidence in themselves and become what the bully wants them to become, the villain rather than the victim. Now, when this happens, the target is trapped. And that is why I called the book The Bully's Trap. So how do organizations deal with all of this? The short answer is they usually don't. Bullying is a byproduct of a psychologically unhealthy workplace. It is a systemic issue that requires a systemic solution. As Oscar Wilde so aptly put it, it is not the prisoners who need the reformation, it's the prisons. Where bullying occurs, it is usually not isolated to a single bully or a single target. In many instances, it is influenced by at the top, where the CEO is also the CBO. These organizations are usually dictatorial, and besides the bullying, there are other dynamics at play, including abuse of power, inappropriate behavior, corruption, and greed. In analyzing the demise of companies like Nortel, AIG, Lehman Brothers, and the list goes on, they all had the characteristics of a dictatorial culture. The global financial meltdown could have been avoided if people in the know had reported wrongdoing. They did not, largely for fear of being retaliated against. In most cases, whistleblowers are viewed as traitors and subjected to bullying as punishment for their treason. More and more organizations are using systemic bullying to get rid of older employees. They do this to lower their average wage and pension cost. Ideally, they want their targets to quit, and when they don't, they will fire them for cause to avoid paying severance. And I think it's safe to say you all know someone who has fallen prey to this. For bullying to stop, it requires cultural transformations that deal with every aspect of how an organization operates. The objective should be to create psychologically healthy workplaces where fear is eliminated. In my discussions with top executives, I get a lot of pushback. Most view my assertions as extreme exaggerations and claim that this is not the case in their arenas. Most are in denial, claiming that they have a zero-tolerance policy. They have enlightened human resource people. They have employee feedback and support systems. In response, I say to them, well, my findings show that where policies, procedures, and systems are in place, if there is a culture of fear, they're useless. Also, my research shows that where bullying occurs, in 80% of the cases, human resources are part of the problem. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, in the Ghomeshi affair is a classic case of how organizations deal with bullies and their targets. After months of denial, the report by the external investigator has finally exposed the toxic culture at CBC, the cover-up mentality by management, and the complicity and ineptness of human resources and the union. Employee engagement is reflective of a workplace culture, and disengagement is cited as and bullying is cited as a major cause for the disengagement. Yet studies show that 87% of North American workers are not engaged, with an astonishingly low 13% who are. Now, if we could just reverse those two numbers, it would boost productivity in North America by about 10%, which amounts to $1 trillion. At the outset, I mentioned a $1.5 trillion opportunity. The other $500,000 is in attrition and absenteeism and training cost. But the bulk of it is in the medical cost associated with disabilities and the economic and social cost of the more than 120,000 deaths annually in North America that may be attributable to workplace stress. Now, if all of this does not motivate boards of directors and senior executives to seriously look at their cultures, nothing will. Working in an environment that is free and safe from bullying and violence is a fundamental right. I hope you will now agree that all too many employees are being denied this right. The work I am doing is just the beginning and is intended to open up much needed debate and discussion. And when I look back at the success of my work, and when I measure it, if one career is saved, it will have done its job. If one family unit survives, it will have done its job. If one organization avoids demise, it will have done its job. If one suicide is not attempted, it will have done its job. And if one murder is not committed, it will have done its job. I implore you and those you know to join me in the discussion and debate so that those millions of people who live in terror today can feel safe and free tomorrow. Thank you so much for the generosity of your attention.
Okay, now let's watch this recap video together. It just summarizes everything we talked about, so let's watch it right now.
Workplace bullying of any type is unacceptable. 50% of employees have either witnessed or been a victim of bullying in the workplace. Bullying has a profound impact on workplace productivity and employee morale. Psychologists have compared the effects of bullying on victims as similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. It destroys creativity, increases employee turnover, and spreads like wildfire through organizations, destroying them from within. What is workplace bullying? Bullying is hostile, aggressive, or unreasonable behavior perpetrated against a coworker. Bullies use these behaviors simply to embarrass and humiliate or to expand their power and influence. Bullying can be peer-to-peer, or it can be perpetrated by managers or supervisors who take advantage of their positions of power. Bullying can be physical, verbal, nonverbal, or psychological. It can occur face-to-face, on the phone, or online, and be perpetrated by groups of employees or by individuals. The following behaviors are considered workplace bullying and are not tolerated in any organization. The use of inappropriate language, put-downs, insults, and name-calling. Taunting, teasing, or making jokes about a coworker when the intent is to embarrass and humiliate. Sabotaging another employee's work, or copying, plagiarizing, or stealing work from a coworker and passing it off as your own. Deliberately isolating or excluding a coworker from work-related activities. Yelling, screaming, sarcasm, or other verbal abuse with the intent to threaten, intimidate, or humiliate. Menacing a coworker with threatening looks, gestures, and body language. Hazing or initiations that seek to physically or psychologically embarrass or humiliate a new coworker. Unreasonably creating conflict or refusing to work with a coworker. Physically threatening, shoving, striking, or touching a coworker in an intimidating or inappropriate manner. Gossiping or spreading rumors about coworkers, including the planting of false information or using private or confidential information to defame or destroy the reputation of a coworker. Setting unrealistic standards and deadlines which are unachievable or that are arbitrarily changed without notice or reason. Giving excessive, unreasonable, and unending amounts of work to a subordinate employee. Deliberately denying coworkers the resources necessary to do their jobs effectively. Ignoring, ridiculing, or belittling a coworker's contribution, or deliberately failing to acknowledge his or her good work. Giving unjustly negative performance appraisals, or taking unwarranted disciplinary action. Singling out or treating a coworker differently, or holding a subordinate employee to different standards than his or her peers. Excessive, unneeded, and negative micromanagement that undermines an employee's ability to do his or her job effectively. Workplace bullying has consequences. Because of the devastating impact that bullying has on a company's creativity, productivity, and morale, there can be severe consequences for engaging in it. It can result in disciplinary actions, including written warnings, suspension, demotion, and even termination. In addition, retaliation for a bullying complaint is strictly prohibited and could result in disciplinary actions up to and including termination. How can you stop workplace bullying? It's simple. Treat coworkers with respect. Treat coworkers fairly and equally. Speak up when you witness bullying. Any witness or victim of workplace bullying should report the conduct to management or human resources. The best way to eliminate bullying in the workplace is to remember the golden rule. Treat coworkers exactly like you would like to be treated, with dignity, respect, fairness, and equality. After all employees deserve a workplace where they can do their jobs to the best of their abilities, a workplace free of fear and full of respect.
All right. I hope that was a recap of everything we talked about. And we're going to look at this particular case study where recently Microsoft had to pay $2 million in settling this workplace bullying case. Um, the judge in Texas employment labor law case, Tim Sulik, has issued a final judgment ordering Microsoft to pay $2 million in compensatory and punitive damages and legal fees. Judge Sulik found the tech giant guilty of acting with malice and reckless indifference in an organized office retaliation against salesman Mercica. They, Microsoft Corporation, remain guilty today, tomorrow, and in perpetuity over egregious acts against me and racist comments by their executive that led to the retaliation and vendetta resulting in my firing, said Mercica after the final judgment was announced. A highly regarded member of the sales department with an unblemished record, Mercica found himself drowning in a nasty workplace conspiracy whereby fellow employees and supervisors undermined his work, falsely accused him of sexual harassment and expense account fraud, and marginalized him and blocked promotions. The story began sometime before 2007 when Marsica ended a relationship with a woman who went on to become his boss. Conditions at work began to change for him. Even though Marsica went to the human relations department at Microsoft, the company did not act and allowed the behaviors to continue and even to escalate. In addition to complaining about his own treatment in the workplace, Marsica directly complained to Microsoft icon Steve Ballmer about sexist and racist comments made in the office by VP Eddie O'Brien. I wrote directly to Ballmer and told him what O'Brien said after the tsunami in Japan, says Marsica. He said, I would have zero pity for Japan. I would throw them right under the bus and create another tsunami if I have to. That complaint to Bomber, Mercica maintains, was another reason his co workers began to isolate him and make the workplace hostile towards him. Marsica and his legal team of two lawyers were up against 250 lawyers that Microsoft set to work on the case. Despite that, Marsica and his lawyers, Roy Pollock and Paul T. Morin of Austin, Texas, 4 years of litigation and some 90,000 documents eventually won the day. Rather than do the right thing, the management went after Michael by getting a female employee to file a sexual harassment complaint and a complaint of retaliation against him, says Paul T. Morin. Microsoft could have taken Marsica's charges seriously and disciplined the senior manager, but instead it engaged in the worst kind of corporate bullying. So obviously, it is pretty plain outright that this kind of conduct exists in the workplace, and it can be targeted. A group of employee can target one employee, um, not just one bully. There can be several bullies coming together, targeting one victim, and the thing or two to take away from this is that Marsica was up against 250 lawyers, um, and it was 4 years of litigation and 90,000 documents, um, and eventually they won because, again, these documentations are very important, everything that happens. So it is very important you as a supervisor let your staff know that they have to document everything. Well, that concludes this training, and I hope everyone got the relevant information that they need to um, identify, prevent, and deal with sexual harassment, and also promote a safe workplace for our employees. Thank you again for attending the course.